Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. The Perfect Coincidence. When Maggie first found the old postcard at the bottom of her grandmother's drawer, she thought nothing of it. It was a typical postcard, nothing spectacular. The image on the front was of a sunny beach with the words, "Greetings from Seabrook," printed in bold letters above a view of the ocean. But the back was what made Maggie freeze. Written in smudged ink, in a neat, looping script, were just 2 lines. "I'll be there at 5 p.m. Don't forget the blue umbrella. It'll be our sign." There was no date, no name, just a message. Maggie wasn't sure why, but it sent a shiver down her spine. She turned the postcard over in her hand. Her grandmother, Clara, had passed away last year, and the postcard was among some of the things Maggie was sorting through as she went through her grandmother's things. She had never seen this postcard before. Clara had never mentioned Seabrook. There were no family vacations to the beach, no secret lovers from some faraway town. There were no blue umbrellas. But the thing that unsettled Maggie the most was how familiar the writing looked. The loops, the curls, they looked exactly like her handwriting. Maggie shook her head, trying to dismiss the thought. It was ridiculous. It was just a coincidence. She had to be imagining things. But still, the words echoed in her mind as she tucked the postcard into her pocket. Over the next few days, Maggie couldn't stop thinking about it. Why had her grandmother kept it? Why hadn't she ever mentioned Seabrook or the blue umbrella? Maggie, for reasons she didn't understand, decided to look into it. The next weekend, she packed her things and headed out to Seabrook. It wasn't far, just a few hours' drive. She didn't know why, but something told her she needed to see it for herself. Seabrook was a little town with the kind of charm that felt a little too quaint, a little too perfect to be real. As Maggie drove through the small streets, she started to feel like she was in a movie. The cobblestone paths, the little cafes with flower boxes in the windows, the sea breeze, it all felt so familiar. She found a small inn to stay in, an old white house with a wraparound porch. The lady at the front desk greeted her with a warm smile, as if she had been expecting her. "First time in Seabrook?" she asked. Maggie nodded. "Yes, just for the weekend." "You'll love it here," the lady said. "The best spot is down by the beach. If you're looking for something to do, The pier's just a short walk. It's beautiful at sunset. Maggie smiled politely, but she wasn't here for the tourist attractions. She was here for something else. That evening, as the sun began to set, Maggie walked down toward the beach. The breeze was cool on her face, and the sand felt soft beneath her feet. She had no idea where she was going, but somehow she felt like the postcard was leading her, like she was following an invisible trail her grandmother had left behind, even though Clara had never told her to come. She walked along the shore, the sound of the waves crashing in the distance. And then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw it. A small blue umbrella, positioned right by the water, almost as if it had been waiting for her. Maggie stopped in her tracks. Her heart raced as she stared at the umbrella. It was a little worn, the fabric faded, but it was unmistakably blue, exactly like the one in the postcard. She approached slowly. There was no one else around, just the umbrella, the sound of the waves, and a growing sense of anticipation. As she reached the umbrella, she saw a bench nearby, old and weathered, its paint chipped from years of saltwater exposure. But what caught her eye next was the piece of paper resting on the bench. It was folded neatly, like a letter with a small, familiar scrawl on the front. "Maggie, open me." Her hand trembled as she unfolded the paper. It wasn't a letter, though. It was another postcard, identical to the one she had found in her grandmother's drawer. The same beach, the same Seabrook at the top. But this time, the words were different. "I'm here, just like I promised. Meet me where the ocean touches the sand. The blue umbrella will be your sign. I'm waiting." Maggie's heart skipped. This can't be happening, she thought, almost breathlessly. She glanced around, but the beach was empty. No one was here. No one had been here, and yet, somehow, she felt drawn to the spot, like it was a place where time and reality blurred. "Clara?" she whispered, almost as if speaking the name aloud would make something happen. But there was no answer, no sign of anyone nearby. She sat down on the bench, the postcard in her lap. The sun was almost fully set now, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange. Then, a figure appeared at the edge of the beach. Maggie's breath caught in her throat. The figure was too far away to make out clearly, but something about the silhouette seemed so familiar. The way they moved, graceful and sure-footed, as if they had walked this very spot 1,000 times. Maggie stood, unable to keep herself seated. She took a few tentative steps toward the figure, her eyes squinting, trying to make sense of the shadow. The person grew clearer as they approached, and Maggie's pulse raced in her ears. It was her grandmother, Clara, standing before her, looking younger than Maggie had ever remembered. Her skin was free of the wrinkles it had when she'd passed. Her hair, though graying when she died, was now thick and dark, cascading down her shoulders. She smiled, a soft, knowing smile that made Maggie's heart ache. "Grandma?" Maggie whispered, her voice barely audible. Clara nodded, her smile deepening. "I knew you'd find me, Maggie." "Find you?" Maggie felt tears well up in her eyes. "But how? How are you here?" Clara reached out, her hand brushing Maggie's cheek. "It's not as complicated as it seems. I needed to bring you back here." "Back home?" Maggie shook her head in disbelief. "But the postcards, they were from you?" "Not exactly," Clara said softly. "The message was always for you. But it wasn't time for you to understand until now. You were always meant to be here, Maggie, right where the ocean meets the sand." Maggie's heart pounded, her thoughts spinning. But why the blue umbrella? Why Seabrook? Clara's eyes softened, and she gave a small, bittersweet laugh. The umbrella was just a symbol, your sign. And as for Seabrook, my dear, well, all I can say is that this is your home now. The wind picked up slightly, the ocean whispering as the world around them seemed to shift again. Like a dream slowly fading, Maggie opened her mouth to ask more, but the words caught in her throat. Clara's figure started to dissolve, becoming less distinct, as if the very air was pulling her back into some distant place. "Wait!" Maggie called, but her grandmother's figure was already gone, leaving nothing behind but the blue umbrella and the sound of the waves. Maggie stood there, her hands trembling, her heart racing. The perfect coincidence, too good to be true, had just happened. The above story ends, but the suspense and thrill have never stopped. Right here is another equally interesting story. Please continue listening. Veil of Night. "I've said too much," Caroline exclaimed. She snatched her rain-soaked black denim jacket from the chair and turned to go. "Caroline, wait!" Hank caught her hand. Her slender fingers felt chill and damp against his. "You can't expect me to believe." "No," she murmured. "No one would. And that's the point. It was useless even coming here. I don't know why I did." Hank squeezed her limp fingers, giving them a shake. "Please, let's start over," he said, motioning for her to sit again. "This cult, it's a coven. The Sisterhood of Unhallowed Light." She fidgeted with a lock of damp, auburn hair stuck to her pale forehead. "Right, the Sisterhood. So, a few women who get together and play at witchcraft? There are 12. They wanted me to join, and I thought I wanted that too. But Caroline caught her bottom lip between her teeth. The midnight hue of her black lipstick was a stark contrast to the pallor of her skin. She took a breath, and the words tumbled from her. "I feel seen by them, like they really get me. They accept me. They celebrate me, just as I am. And what they offer, the sense of belonging, the knowledge, power. I thought, why shouldn't I? A flash of lightning lit the rain-spattered window, with a crack of thunder following close behind. Caroline's eyes grew large with panic, and she twisted in her seat to look outside. There are things we shouldn't play with, she whimpered. I know that now. I've completed 2 of the 3 initiation rituals with the sisterhood. And you're saying this torrential rain we've been having these past 3 days is part of that? That's awfully biblical, isn't it? This isn't hurricane season, Hank. He shrugged and twisted his mouth in a half-ways grin. With weather patterns these days, who can tell what season it is anymore? It was me. It was the sisterhood. It's part of the ritual, part of the summoning. Coincidence, that's all. She clutched his arm where the sleeve of his t-shirt ended, digging her cold, clammy fingers into his bicep, and pleaded. You wouldn't say that if you knew what I've done, what I've gone through to make this happen. Caroline, she let go of Hank's arm and fumbled with the top buttons of her black shirt. Yanking one half of it to her left side, she exposed part of her chest. A long vertical slash was bisected by a shorter one, forming an inverted cross over her heart. The 2 slashes stood out as angry purplish-red marks on her otherwise smooth, pale flesh, and were knitted together with black stitches. They made me promise my heart to Valthus, the formless entity of writhing darkness whom they worship. Hank stared for a moment, then sputtered. Valthus? Your heart? Come on, Caroline. What? Am I supposed to believe they've cut out your heart? Isn't it usually the soul these sort of fanatics are after? Caroline grasped Hank's fingers in her trembling hand and placed his palm over the wound on her chest. Her skin was unnaturally cool. He held his hand there for a moment, then brought his fingers up to her throat, feeling for a pulse. Another clap of thunder startled them both. Hank pulled his hand from Caroline's neck. He stared at her in disbelief, saying, This is some kind of joke. A prank. It's not real. How could you be here telling me all this if they've taken out your heart? I don't know, she sobbed. But I think I've made an awful mistake. You've got to help me. Promise you won't let them take me. No, of course not. Where would they take you anyway? A hospital? It's an abandoned old church, Blackthorn Chapel. They want to take me there for the final ritual, Caroline said. To complete the summoning of Valthus, they need to make an offering of the heart. But aren't you supposed to be joining them? Becoming one of their coven? This sounds more like a sacrifice. Yes, it does. They told me it was my initiation. But Caroline trailed off, turning to stare at the rain beating against the window. In a low whisper, she continued, Now I'm not so sure. That's why I'm frightened. The blinding flash of light lit up the nearby window, and a deafening roar of thunder shook the house. A loud crash followed. Nearby, a car horn began sounding, repeating its alarm annoyingly. Hank leapt to his feet and crossed the room to look outside. Christ, that was close. The tree next door has split nearly in two. Some of its limbs have fallen over a few cars on the street. The lights inside the house flickered. Once, twice, and a third time before plunging them into darkness. "I'll get some candles," Hank said, cursing as he caught his toe on some piece of furniture. He fumbled his way to the kitchen. "Just need to find my phone so I can light the way." One more thunderclap boomed overhead. A sudden blast of wind swirled through the house. Footsteps pounded across the floor. Caroline shrieked, and there were sounds of a struggle from the other room. "No!" Caroline cried out. "I won't go! Hank, don't let them take me." Hank stumbled from the kitchen and could see down the hallway to the front door. It was swung wide open, and the wind and rain swept through in howling gusts. "Caroline?" Hank called out. He heard glass shattering all around him. The back of his head felt like an explosion had gone off, and the world tilted and shifted into slow motion. Hank sank to his knees. His vision was filled with a combination of swirling stars and inky blackness. The sounds of frantic struggle moved away from him as his hands slapped the carpeted floor. He struggled to breathe and clear his sight as he held himself from pitching forward onto his face. "Caroline!" he shouted. His head throbbed viciously, and he thought he might be sick. From outside, he heard car doors slamming, and a vehicle roared to life. He struggled to his feet and made it to the front door. Through the sheets of rain, he saw the burning glow of red tail lights receding down his street. Pursuit wasn't an easy option. The tree limbs, which had fallen over several cars, were blocking Hank's car as well. He slashed at them with a hatchet he had stowed in his camping gear. The rest of the fallen limbs tore at the side and undercarriage of Hank's car, but he managed to break free. He swore and cursed some more. The lousy cell service the storm had left him with made searching the internet difficult. After several minutes, he found directions to and a description of Blackthorn Chapel on a website promoting ghost walks in the city. Once a place of worship, the old chapel had fallen into disrepair, and the ground beneath was, so the locals claimed, cursed. It took nearly an hour to detour around storm debris and reroute past streets that had been rendered impassable before he arrived at his destination. If he'd paid the $50 for the Ghost Walk tour, Blackthorn Chapel would have rated 5 stars. It was surrounded by an overgrown and tangled hedge of blackthorn shrubs, buffeted by the wind and rain. The gnarled limbs seemed to claw at the twilit sky, as though grasping at something unseen. The crumbling stone walls were cracked and weathered. The roof was partially caved in, showing an outline of jagged edges that looked like the jaws of some wild beast snarling or snapping at the heavens. And the heavy wooden doors were worn and splintered and hanging slightly ajar on great rusted iron hinges. The jet-black gloom beyond the entrance seemed more of warning to sensible folk rather than an invitation to step inside. But if there was any chance, he might save Caroline. Inside was where Hank needed to be. He passed through an opening in the rough hedge, careful not to let the thorns sink their barbs into him. Walking in through the front entrance, he'd decided, would be courting failure. He might as well put his head through a noose. Instead, Hank crept around to the side of the run-down property, searching for another way into the chapel. Lightning lit the horizon several miles off. The brief flash revealed to him that he was creeping through a graveyard, which was part of the chapel grounds. Most of the headstones were crooked, sinking into the ground. Some had fallen or been knocked over. Many lay half-buried in tufted humps of wild grass. With a sense of dread, he picked his way carefully through the tangle of ancient stones and grass until he was out of the graveyard and could lean against the chapel wall. His heart was pounding as he panted silently, trying to catch his breath. Above the howling of the storm, a sound caught his ear. Soft at first, but regular, insistent, and coming from inside the chapel. Hank strained to make out what he was hearing. It was definitely chanting of some sort. Hank edged along the stone wall to the back of the crumbling old building. The ground sloped down, revealing the foundations of the chapel. He spotted a break in the wall and rushed to it. It was a narrow space, but large enough, he felt, to squeeze inside. Before he did so, Hank hefted the hatchet in his hand. He couldn't imagine actually using it to hack away at some unseen coven member. That would be slasher movie extreme. He twisted it around in his hand so that the square end faced out, becoming his weapon. He sucked in a few deep breaths, questioning his sanity. Then he scraped and squeezed his way through the narrow space. Feeling his way around in the dark, Hank discovered a series of long wooden boxes. Great, he thought. Could this night get any spookier? He'd found his way into the crypt. It took him a few minutes to pick his way around, but he eventually found a set of stairs leading to the proper part of the chapel. This was one of the cloisters, or side chapels. The chanting was more distinct. He could make out the words, "Valthis, Valthis, veil of night, drown the stars, consume the light from the maw, where silence dies, open now your 1,000 eyes." He edged carefully toward a gap in the wall, which entered into the chapel's nave. There were broken pews scattered throughout the space, casting long shadows from the candles, which lit up the altar at the front. Shadow deep and shadow wide, stretch the fold, let worlds collide. What was whole? Let it decay, let the void now have its way. He saw Carolyn, bound and gagged. She was wide-eyed and frantic, struggling to break free of her bonds. Unseen horror, whispered breath, we call you forth. We offer death, one by one, we fade. We kneel, take our names, unmake us real. A quick count revealed only 8 figures in hooded robes surrounding Caroline. He thought she'd said they were 12 in number. But this would be better odds. Hank hefted the hatchet in his hand one more time, feeling as confident as a person could ever be faced with such a scene. He took one step forward, but that was as far as he got. He was grasped from behind, his arms, legs, and even his torso in the grip of unseen talon-like hands. With swift force, they pulled him backwards, throwing him off balance. A ragged cloth was pressed over his nose and mouth. He struggled and tried to scream. Then blackness engulfed him. When he came to, Hank found he was now stretched out over the altar. His hands and feet were bound. Looking up, he could see eerie shadows playing across the vaulted arch above. "I'm sorry, Hank," Caroline said. "I had to do it." He snapped his head around in the direction of her voice and saw she was standing to his left. She held a long, curved dagger in her hands. The other coven members, all 12 of them now, were surrounding him. We needed a heart to complete my initiation and call down Valthis." He thought he'd known fear earlier in his pursuit of Caroline's attackers. Now, a choking sensation that felt like ice was spreading through his chest. In his head, Hank shouted Caroline's name, but the gag in his mouth prevented him from getting that or any other words that followed out. The coven members began to chant once more, "Valthis, Valthis, veil of night, drown the stars, consume the light." Let's continue with the next no less thrilling stories. Dear Death, dear Death, hello, old friend. I would be amiss if I called you a stranger now, as the frequency of your visits in my life have made us more than acquaintances. It has been years since our first run-in together. When I met you, I didn't understand. You were a being within yourself, a standalone, vital force that I didn't recognize for what you really stood for. Your introduction to me preceded the death of my grandpa on September 24th, 1998. The mighty being that he was, the biggest form of life I knew, was ripped from me, and you were the thief that came in and stole him. He lived a long life, I was told, satisfied, and a job well done. But as I heard these things, none of them gave me comfort. Silently, I began to develop distrust. You made me weary of so many things, of bonds formed with those around me, of meaningful, lasting love that would carry me through hardships, and of you, death itself, and that you could take from me in an instant what life had freely given me to experience. I was only 13 years old, but I knew you were someone I needed to always watch out for. That you would be there even while I smiled and enjoyed life and the moments it actually made me smile. I thought we wouldn't meet again for years to come. I thought I had given enough of my heart to you when I was a child to buy my way through years of togetherness with those that I loved. I thought my heartache was payment enough. But you had other plans. September 6th, 2020. The eldest of my grandfather's children, his only baby girl, was taken. You started with a queen. I must tell you, and her death hit me hard. My auntie was the most thoughtful, caring, most, even if I don't have my life together, I'm going to look out for you, most amazing woman I have ever known. She was loud, boisterous, fun-loving, but would teach you a well-needed lesson. She was the oldest of all boys, so she was tough. Yet, even she was no match for you and your exploits. You took her from us and never looked back. June 27th, 2021. I learned my first lesson on how unfair you could be. My 12-year-old cousin was snatched away so fast by you. None of us seen it coming. For the first time in my life, I saw a mother so broken by her grief, she could barely speak. A father so lost without his son, he could barely stand before the casket that held him and say goodbye. But most of all, your grim visit showed me that no matter how much I loved my children or tried to protect them from the harsh realities of the life, when it really mattered, my love couldn't save them from you. No amount of protecting them in the world would keep them from your grasp when you decided to whisk through my life and take them or someone else I love. November 1st, 2022. You sought me out in the worst of ways. You knew all too well my fears and panic over the remote possibility of me losing one of my children. Knew all too well that it would destroy me. Opening the door to my daughter's room that day, I walked into my nightmare, made my reality. Death, you take many a soul, every night, always there to absorb the essence of those we lose. So I know you heard my whispered words in the night. I know you knew, down to the fiber of your being, my worst fear. I know you knew my truth as deep and as well as I did. So when realized, you took my daughter, another bright light that those around me, who have nothing else to offer as comfort, will say, was a life gone too soon. It solidified my ill thoughts of you, that you didn't play fair, that you took every opportunity to fight dirty. My daughter, one piece of my tattered heart that I managed to birth and have walk around personified, flesh and blood. You take her, and not me. You felt, as you always do, that it was time, that she had done all she was here to do, and that again, it was a job well done, and she no longer had to face a world where depression and sadness touched her. The traumas she experienced and always took her mind to a place where I couldn't reach her would never again have her lost. Here, I have to be honest with you, Death. As much as I hate to even say your name, I am overjoyed that the ugliness of life can never reach her again. But I needed more time. 15 years will never be enough. I look for her in the moon, as I know you walked her toward it. However, I will forever say, you're unfair. She was my glue, that kid that kept us all together. She was just finding her smile, her real smile, just finding a reason beyond me, as she told me, to live her life to the fullest. You took her little sister's person, and the one she talked to all the time, her brother's game partner, whom he discovered new levels on Soul Calibur with, her big sister's binge show watcher, and how they could watch whole seasons together in one night, her father's favorite, and how he doted on her, her mama number two's confidant, and how she helped her realize it was okay to love herself. You took my partner in crime, my me and you against it all, if you will, the one who would make me smile even when the world sought out my tears. Shame on you. In losing her, I lost myself, and I have no one else to blame but you. How dare you take my child from me? Have you not taken enough in your time with me? From your time with everyone? From the unexpectant parents who should never have to bury their children, or the children you've orphaned? Has your roster not been filled with mothers and fathers, beloved aunts or favorite uncles? My daughter's name was too pure to be added to your list. And as the world moved on, going back to the daily hustle and bustle, I'm here stuck in the moment. You ripped my sanity to shreds, and in the far reaches of my mind, I can hear the echoes of your laughter. And I know you feel pleasure in the grief you leave in your wake. That is when all the "I'm here if you need me's" or the "call me anytimes" slow down, and the quiet nights last longer than you ever imagined they could last. I always come back to you. I think about how you have visited me so many times just to destroy my peace and disrupt my every day. The day you took my daughter, You took a piece of me too, and you have left me forever, grasping at the dark threads of your coattails, trying to hold on to the part of me you are trying to take, my grip constantly slipping, but I can't let go. To let go of you would mean I lose my grasp on her. The only thing that pulled me through was my support system that surrounded me and helped me recover from your violent breeze of a visit. Your homecomings always come with tears and loss. I'm finally coming to realize. August 11th, 2023. You paid me a visit once again, but this time I expected you. The cancer that ravished my uncle's body and had him giving up on life were signs that alerted me. You weren't far behind. Out of the 7 uncles I have, he was my favorite. When I came out and introduced the family to my now wife, he was the one who protected me from judgment and harsh words. Any problem with me had to go through him first, and he accepted me even before my father told me he loved me still. We could talk about anything, and we did. We talked about religion, life, politics, love, relationships, and more. There was never any judgment. My whole life, he loved me for me. Yet again, you decided we had enough of the mighty presence he exuded, and you snuffed his light out after a long, hard-fought battle. The only solace I take in his passing is that he no longer has to go through that pain. And I suppose, deep down, if I'm honest, I should thank you for that. But that's where my thanks for you ends. Death. If you're still with me, I promise I'll tell you why. I had the honor for 39 years to have a man in my life who stood through it all. A man who, no matter what the test that was thrown at him, he found a way to make it work. How he stood tall against adversity. Who made sure he built and had the foundation to bring to any table. A man who showed up whenever called upon. Who had so much wisdom that he imparted, whether you wanted him to or not, and always did it with love. And it was exactly what you needed to hear. I had the pleasure of calling this man my father. When I seen him when he lost his own father, I watched him put his grief to the side to stand tall for his sister and brothers. How I seen him tuck his fear of you, death, and stand in the place you had just removed his father from and lead his family. When I seen this, I seen a mighty, strong man that stood against it all, including you, to make a way for his entire family. Not just his children, but for his brothers, wife, and anyone he came into contact with. He exuded strength in a way that made even you, death, stand still, if only for a while. For as you always do, you creeped and snaked your way in and preyed on most anyone's worst fear, losing the ones they love. You always find a way to strike when our defenses are down and our hearts are at their fullest. My father's strength is what I always leaned on, what I drew from. When I was weak, he poured his strength into me, even if he didn't know it. Whenever I called for him, he showed up, no questions asked. It was this example he set for me that allows me to show up for my children in the same way. When I needed my father, he was more to me than anyone could ever be. Yet the smile that man brought to my face shined too bright for you to know that he was one of the main reasons I survived. You selfishly taking my daughter from me. To know he poured so much life into me, even though you had tried your hardest to break me. To know that I no longer have that strength to call upon has broken me in a way I never knew a person could break. I see you relish in the pain you cause as you unfairly take the children of strangers, mothers who have lost their young ones, just like me. You make me know them in a way I never would understand, unless I too, like them, have you as a friend. We know you're toxic, but we're stuck with you, attached for the rest of our lives. I never wanted to know them, or you like this. The next year, I began to unbend myself, for what had been meant to destroy me didn't, although it definitely bent me almost to my breaking point. I became complacent and comfortable, taking for granted phone calls and visits with those I held dear, thinking I had those moments in abundance. I became forgetful of the power and pain you wielded so freely and without favorites, because I hadn't seen you for over 365 days. I relaxed enough to think, I can finally breathe. It hurts, and it's labored, and feel like needles poke me with every intake. But I can take a breath, and it feels like I never have before. 2024 for me was a year of realization, reckoning, redirection, and remembrance. And I must admit, the embedded hate I constantly feel for you, the fear of you that I always have on the back burner of my mind, took a back seat to my goals and achievements and my planning to make things better for me and my family, and do them to honor my daughter's memory. It was a time for promises made and kept, to do better for her than I had been doing in the time since she'd been gone. For I had lost myself for a long time because of your thievery. When I lost her, I lost a large part of who I was, and I spent months on an alcoholic whirlwind. It was my father who finally broke through my hazy merry-go-round. With his love and understanding and words of wisdom and support. I'm 39, and I still have yet to make a single decision without him. His opinion has always held a heavy weight in what I decide to do, no matter how big or small the decision. To you, however, my decisions are irrelevant and null in void. For you decided, once again, that I'd had enough. And when you decide things, your decisions come with such finality. I'm starting to understand that you see our fears and they empower you. You made me realize, in real time, one of my worst fears. And yet, not even a full 3 years from the date I lost my baby, and you took the air form my lungs, you're still searching the inner reaches of my being for more, saying gleefully to yourself, who else is she scared of losing that I can take and watch how she crumbles? On January 27th, 2025, my pillar of strength, my Papachu, my Superman, breathed his last breath. He kissed my mother on her cheek, told her he loved her, waited until he was alone with you, and followed you onto the abyss. How can he be gone? He's Superman. I assume you were his kryptonite. He knew he was close and felt you hovering. But he knew all too well our fear of losing someone else, and that fear of you hurting us again kept him quiet. You stole his voice, and he couldn't let us know his true pain. Although I didn't think I would see you again for years to come, when I felt you this time around, you were like a fragrance in the air that I recognized instantly. I hate that you are so familiar to me. You took my daddy. How could you? When I got the call carrying the worst news I could hear, I knew it was because of you, before a word was spoken. You, death, have left me truly on my own in this world, with this constant, pulsing, alive, reverberating fear of your next coming, and who you will take this time. I don't even know if I fear you anymore. More so, I now expect you to unexpectedly, without any preparation on my part, will float through my life and etch notches in me as if I were a wall measuring the continued growth of a child. You have shattered my already broken heart into a million pieces, and all I can manage is this plea, death. I plead with you. Let us once again become strangers. Let us become so distant. The thought of remembrance between us is alien. I want to know you no more. Flee from me and touch not any more of those I love. I have given enough of my heart as payment for the bonds I've created, and you have severed. Please sail away on the ocean of tears. You have forced me to cry and never return to me. Signed, your well-known, but very reluctant and unwilling friend, Khalees, And the next story will be told right away. Please listen carefully. The Day Los Angeles. Changed Sophia's spoon clinked against porcelain as she stirred her tea, the sound barely audible beneath the morning bustle of the morning brew. Outside the window, autumn painted the small town of San Bernardino in shades of amber and gold. So different from Los Angeles, where even fall seemed reluctant to interrupt the city's relentless energy. "You're stirring that tea to death," her mother observed, eyes crinkling with gentle humor. "Still not sleeping well?" Sophia looked up, caught in the act. Serenity Williams had always possessed an uncanny ability to read her daughter, even as cancer steadily claimed her strength. Today was a good day. Her mother sat upright without assistance, her silver-streaked hair neatly combed, her smile warm despite the hollowness in her cheeks. "Claire's having nightmares again," Sophia admitted. "And Mark's firm is restructuring, which means longer hours. I'm not sure this was the right time to visit, even for a weekend." Serenity reached across the table, her hand light but steady as it covered Sophia's. "There's never a perfect time for anything important. You're here now. That's what matters." The cafe hummed around them, baristas calling out orders, the espresso machine hissing, customers tapping away at their laptops or scrolling through their phones. On a wall-mounted television, the morning news rolled through its predictable cycle. Political tensions, economic forecasts, celebrity gossip. The scent of fresh coffee and baked goods wrapped around them like a familiar blanket. "Tell me more about Claire's school play," Serenity prompted, taking a careful sip from her cup. "You said she landed the lead role?" Sophia's face brightened. "She's playing Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. You should see her practicing Somewhere Over the Rainbow around the house. Mark recorded her last rehearsal. I can show you." Her words trailed off as the cafe's television caught her attention. The news had switched to a traffic helicopter shot over Los Angeles, a routine segment showing the morning gridlock. The reporter's voice carried over footage of the 405 freeway, mentioning construction delays near Westwood, where Mark worked. Expect those delays to continue through the afternoon rush hour. Alternative routes are advised for. The screen flashed white. For a fraction of a second, Sophia thought it was a technical glitch. Then the blinding light resolved into something else, as two massive fireballs erupted over the Los Angeles skyline, twin terrifying mushroom clouds climbing into the atmosphere. The helicopter camera jolted violently, the image spinning as the reporter's voice cut off mid-sentence, static. Then, blackness. The morning brew fell silent. Every conversation halted mid-word. Every movement suspended. For 3 long seconds, no one breathed. Sophia felt the world contract to a pinpoint. Sophia let slip a tiny gasp. Her coffee cup slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering against the floor. but she couldn't hear it. All she could see was that burning flower blossoming over her home, over Mark, over Claire. Sophia, her mother's voice seemed to come from miles away. Sophia, look at me. Sophia couldn't move, couldn't blink. At a loss for words, her body had turned to stone while her mind screamed. Around them, the stunned silence fractured. Someone gasped. A man at the counter swore loudly. A barista fumbled for the remote control, frantically changing channels. Each station showed variations of the same nightmare: emergency broadcasts, confused anchors, footage of the explosion from different angles. What appears to be at least 2 nuclear detonations over Los Angeles. No official statement yet from authorities, advising all residents to shelter in place. Sophia's phone vibrated in her pocket. Her heart leapt. Mark? Claire? But when she pulled it out with trembling fingers, the screen displayed only an emergency alert. National emergency declared. Shelter in place. Await further instructions. She stared at the message, its cold, bureaucratic tone at odds with the catastrophe unfolding. Desperately, she tried calling Mark's number. Nothing. She tried Claire's phone. Nothing again. Each attempt met with the same automated message. All circuits are currently busy. Please try your call again later. That sterile, mechanical voice seemed to mock her panic. All circuits busy. As if this were just another holiday, with too many calls being placed at once. As if her world hadn't just collapsed into ash. Around them, the cafe erupted into chaos. People scrambled for phones, for exits, for any semblance of control. A businessman shouted into his dead cell about evacuations. A college student sobbed openly into her hands. The barista continued flipping channels frantically, as if one might suddenly offer reassurance. Is it just LA? Someone demanded. Are there other cities? My sister's in San Diego, a woman cried. She's not answering. The terrorists might have finally developed a nuke. No, it's gotta be an accident. Nuclear war, man. The Chinese, the Russians. Outside, ancient, long disused air raid sirens began to wail. Through the window, Sophia could see people rushing down the sidewalks, some toward their cars, others seemingly without direction. A police cruiser sped past, lights flashing. Sophia's thoughts whirled like debris in a tornado. Mark and Claire, 12 miles from downtown Los Angeles. Was that close enough to the blasts? Had Mark gotten to Claire's school in time? Were they trying to leave the city or shelter in place? The questions multiplied, each more terrifying than the last. The spell binding Sophia's tongue broke, and she could finally speak. I have to go back, she whispered, then louder. I have to go back to LA. Her mother's grip tightened around her wrist. Sophia, breathe. Think. They need me. Panic clawed at Sophia's throat. I need to find them. Look at the TV, Serenity said firmly. Look, the television now showed aerial footage of highways leading out of Los Angeles. Gridlock, unlike anything Sophia had ever seen. Thousands of vehicles at a standstill, some abandoned as people continued on foot. The military conspicuously absent from every possible scene, advising against attempting to enter the Los Angeles metro area. Radiation concerns as far as 40 miles from the blast sites. National Guard has been activated. Sophia's phone buzzed again with the same emergency alert. National emergency declared. Shelter in place. Await further instructions. I can't just sit here, Sophia hissed, tears finally breaking through her shock. Mom, I can't. Serenity pulled herself up straighter, summoning strength that shouldn't have been possible in her frail body. When she spoke, her voice cut through the cafe's panic with surprising authority. Listen to me, Sophia Ayala Williams. Your fear wants you to run, but running blind is how people get killed in disasters. She took Sophia's trembling hands in hers. Breathe first, think second, act third. You taught Claire that, remember? When she gets overwhelmed, the mention of her daughter's name sent fresh pain through Sophia's chest. But she forced herself to inhale deeply. Once, twice. Her mother's eyes held hers, anchoring her to the moment. Mark is smart, Serenity continued. He knows to get Claire somewhere safe. He knows you're here with me. You charging into a nuclear disaster zone helps no one. But what if? No what ifs yet. Facts first. What do we know? Despite herself, Sophia felt her analytical mind begin to engage. There were 2 explosions over Los Angeles. People were leaving the city, but the military does not seem to be reacting yet. There looked like a massive area of LA leveled by the explosion. Good. What else? Roads are jammed. The military will soon be blocking entry. There might be radiation. The reality of that word hit her anew, and she swallowed hard. Communications are overloaded, with everyone trying to check on their loved ones. The news cut to a press briefing where the perky smile of the blonde, blue-eyed, and comely presidential press secretary, incongruent to the chaos erupting, confirmed what everyone already knew. 2 nuclear devices had detonated over Los Angeles. Origin unknown. Casualty estimates pending. Military response underway. The potential for additional attacks could not be ruled out. And does everyone like my new lip gloss? The press secretary asked. I can't just wait here, Sophia whispered. I can't. Serenity studied her daughter's face. No, you can't. But you need a plan, not panic, for the next hour as the world unraveled around them. Sophia and her mother remained at their table. The cafe transformed into an impromptu crisis center for the customers. The owner turned up the television volume, distributed free coffee, and allowed people to charge phones on every available outlet. Information trickled in. The blasts had occurred over downtown Los Angeles. Early estimates suggested the devices were relatively small by nuclear standards. Tactical nukes, like the RSM-56 Bulava, rather than strategic nuclear weapons. But devastating nonetheless. Sophia tried every communication method she could think of. Calls, texts, emails, and social media messages. Most failed, but occasionally a text would go through, only to receive no response. She left voice messages that grew increasingly desperate. "I'm coming to find you. Wait for me. I love you both." Outside, the town of San Bernardino transformed. Police directed traffic at intersections. Lines formed at gas stations. The grocery store across the street was mobbed. People hugged strangers or argued violently about what to do next. And through it all, Serenity remained calm, her presence a counterweight to the mounting hysteria. She helped Sophia gather information, separating facts from rumors, while conserving her limited energy. "The radiation reports are mixed," Sophia noted, scanning emergency updates on her tablet. "Some areas might be relatively safe, especially with proper precautions. And Mark knows this," Serenity reminded her. "He'll get Claire to safety if he can." If he can. The words hung between them, unaddressed. By mid-afternoon, Sophia had made her decision. She would return to Los Angeles, not in blind panic, but with purpose and preparation. Her mother didn't try to dissuade her. She recognized the determination in her daughter's eyes. "I'll be back for you," Sophia promised, as she prepared to leave. "Once I find them, we'll all come back here." Serenity smiled sadly. "I know you will." She pressed something into Sophia's hand, a small silver locket containing a family photo. For luck, the drive that should have taken over an hour stretched before Sophia like an impossible gauntlet. Roads would be clogged. Gas might be scarce. And at the end waited either reunion or devastation. "I love you, Mom," she whispered, embracing Serenity carefully, conscious of her fragility. "Find them," Serenity replied simply. "Be smart. Be safe." As Sophia's car pulled away from the morning brew, Serenity Williams watched from the window. Sophia touched her fingers to the glass in silent farewell, praying that her mother, Serenity, and her daughter, Claire, would forgive her for the choice she'd been forced to make today. Between the mother who was dying and the family who might already be gone. The afternoon shadows grew long as Sophia's car raced along the westbound interstate back to Los Angeles. The main highways heading east had quickly become impassable, choked with the vehicles of fleeing civilians. Radio reports described mass evacuations from areas surrounding Los Angeles, the declaration of martial law, and conflicting radiation warnings. Sophia had expected gridlock all the way, but the lack of any vehicle but hers heading west made the drive that more unsettling. The traffic thinned as she approached LA. The further she drove, the emptier the roads became. She was alone on the freeway. A surreal experience on roadways normally congested at all hours. The emptiness carried its own warning. She was driving toward something everyone else was fleeing. Sophia's GPS had stopped working hours ago, but she didn't need it. 15 years in Los Angeles had etched these routes into her memory. Exit here, turn there, the familiar path home. As she crested the final hill that should have revealed their neighborhood, her headlights illuminated a transformed landscape. Where apartment buildings and shopping centers should have stood, there was absence, rubble, small fires, and just nothing. A perfect circle of annihilation. She pulled to the side of the road, stepping out into air that smelled wrong, like sulfur and ash and things that had no name. The evening was eerily quiet. No sirens, no voices, no wildlife, just the soft tick of her cooling engine and the blood rushing in her ears. Beyond the destruction's edge, buildings remained mostly intact, untouched save for their destroyed windows, as if a giant cookie cutter had stamped down from above, removing only what lay within its circumference. Their apartment had been 3 blocks inside what was now emptiness. Sophia walked forward in a daze, approaching the edge of obliteration. Something crunched beneath her shoes. Glass fused with asphalt, transformed by unimaginable heat. The boundary between existence and nothingness was shockingly abrupt. Mark wouldn't have had time to leave home and then driven to Claire's school, she reasoned desperately. He could have left early for his regular gym workout and could have driven straight to her. Her school must be outside this circle. They could still be alive. They must be. The distant growl of engines broke the silence. Headlights swept the devastation as a convoy of military vehicles rumbled into view. Camp Pendleton Marines in full hazmat gear disembarked, moving with half-practiced efficiency. One spotted her and approached, face obscured behind a protective mask. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area. You need to evacuate immediately." The faceless Marine barked. "My family," Sophia's voice cracked. "My husband and daughter, they lived here." The soldier's posture remained tense and rigid, clearly on edge. "I'm sorry, ma'am. There were no survivors within the blast radius. Radiation levels here are dangerous. We need to leave now." "But they might not have been home," she insisted. "My daughter's school It must be outside the blast radius. My husband might have... Ma'am? The soldier cut her off, not unkindly. Secondary evacuation sites have been established for survivors. Check there, but you can't stay here. It isn't safe. As if to emphasize his point, a radiation detector at his belt emitted a persistent clicking that grew faster as they stood talking. Where? She demanded. Where are these evacuation sites? Before he could answer, another Marine approached rapidly. Sir, we've got missile incoming. What? Said the first Marine. Bogey confirmed. ETA 2 minutes. The first Marine's demeanor changed instantly. Everyone back to your vehicles. Move, move, move. Around them, the unit scrambled into motion, abandoning whatever task had brought them to ground zero. What's happening? Sophia asked, fear rising anew in her chest. The Marine gripped her arm. Another missile, headed right for us. We need to go, now. Another? The words died in her throat as understanding dawned. This wasn't over. Now, the soldier urged. Get in your car and drive east as fast as you can. Don't stop until you're at least 50 miles out. Sophia stumbled back toward her vehicle, moving on autopilot. As she reached for the door handle, some instinct made her look up. There, cutting across the darkening evening sky, was a thin, white line, like a shooting star, moving in slow motion. But unlike a shooting star, it wasn't arcing away. It was descending, the third, markedly larger missile coming to finish what the first two had started. Sophia stood frozen, again at a loss for words, with her hand still extended toward her car door. The Marine shouted something at her, but his words were lost in the strange silence that had enveloped her consciousness. She watched the white line grow brighter and tracked its inevitable path toward the ruined city, toward her. In that moment, Sophia understood with perfect clarity what her mother had tried to teach her that morning. Some forces were beyond human control. Some decisions led only to different versions of the same ending. She thought of Mark and Claire. Whether they had perished already, or had they survived only to face this missile. She thought of her mother, alone in San Bernardino, watching the news and knowing her daughter would never return. Sophia's hand dropped from the car door. The approaching missile reflected in her eyes as she tilted her face skyward. There would be no scream, no lamentation, no running from what had already been decided. There was only the overwhelming weight of understanding. The nightmare wasn't over. It was only beginning. Just when you think all the weird stuff has been told, the next story will make you think again. What She Left Behind. California, 1868. Clara Emerson pressed herself against the train window, her eyes glazed and alert from exhaustion. She stretched out her aching legs, revealing her muddy shoes that poked out from underneath the hem of her dress. She retracted her feet back from visibility, gathering and stroking her straw-like, graying hair as she peered out the window. Clara glanced to see if anyone was watching her. Only a handful of people sat behind her, none of which were looking in her direction. No, I'm safe. She drew in a deep breath, steadying herself. But unease coiled in her chest and churned in her belly. Turning in her seat, she lowered her gaze to the small diamond band on her finger. Sunlight caught in its facets, scattering tiny prisms across her skin. For just a moment, she marveled at its beauty. Clara looked up and locked eyes with a man several seats ahead, clean-shaven, with thin-framed spectacles perched on his nose. The man stared at her with a hollow, unreadable expression. Her pulse kicked. How long had he been watching her without her noticing? Her skin went purr and clammy, like a predator spotting easy prey. The man rose from his seat and approached her, not breaking eye contact once. Clara's stiffened in her seat as the man approached. "Go away. May I sit? I have a long journey ahead of me, and I could sure use the company," he said to her. "No." Of course. The man sat down across from her. His eyes remained on her, almost as if they were boring into her very soul. "Didn't anyone tell you it's rude to stare?" she asked him, hoping that illuminating his behavior would cause him to cease. But it did not. "Forgive me, ma'am. It's just, you look so familiar. Do we know each other, perhaps?" "No, I don't recall your face. You must be mistaken." "No, I think we do know each other." Why won't he quit? "Where are you from?" "I'm not going to tell you that. You haven't even told me who you are." "Ah, how foolish of me. My name is Simon Klein." He leaned forward, extending his hand to her. He sat back down and continued to stare at her, expectantly this time. Clara sighed, brushing a strand of hair out of her face. "I'm Elaine. Elaine Whitmore. Elaine. I would have taken you for an Alice or Charlotte or Clara." Clara froze in her seat, her eyes wide and her palms sweaty. "Who is this man?" "No, I'm just Elaine." Mr. Klein gave her a wry smile, shaking his head. "So, where are you headed to?" Clara shrugged. "Anywhere that's far away from here." "Ah, come on. California's the place to be. There's opportunity here." "Not for me. Not anymore." "Shame," he said. "What is?" Mr. Klein chuckled. "Surely you have friends or family that will miss you. It almost sounds like you're running away." Now he was just getting on her nerves. "You're quite brazen, Mr. Klein. My business is none of your concern." Mr. Klein pressed his lips tightly together, as if he were in pain, and forced out a smile. "My apologies, Mrs. Whitmore. I never quite learned how to keep my nose out of others' affairs. I am a curious fellow, curious indeed." Hoping to break the tension, she pulled out a flask from underneath her shawl. "Care for a drink?" A wild glimmer in his eyes appeared. It was as if he wanted to reach out and strangle her. "No, thank you," he said, his demeanor shifting. There was something dangerous underneath this man's calm exterior. Somehow, that made him more terrifying. If he were angry and violent from the start of their encounter, she could predict his next move and accept that she was under attack. But this man unnerved her to her core. There was something almost familiar about him. Gathering her shawl, she stood from her seat, and as steady as she could present herself to be, she faced him. I think I would prefer to be in my own company for the rest of the journey. Good day to you. Please, there's no need to leave. If you wish to be alone, I can accommodate. Mr. Klein stood, moving back to his original seat. Clara returned to hers, facing away from Mr. Klein this time. But she could still feel his eyes on her. She waited until the train had passed a dilapidated old shack close to the tracks before rising from her seat and creeping her way down toward the caboose. Her heart quickened, as did her pace. "Excuse me, sir," she heard behind her. Sucking in a breath, she chanced a glance behind her, locking eyes with Mr. Klein, who was trailing close behind her. He did not smile this time at her. His eyes were cold and focused on her intently, like before. But there was a rage in those eyes, a bloodlust, in fact. She didn't think twice this time, turning and running down the aisle like a mad woman. She stumbled through the empty train carts, praying an escape plan would present itself to her before he reached her. But there wasn't enough time, and there was nowhere left to run. "I'm trapped." She looked out the back window and considered the tracks. Maybe she could jump. Maybe. She might still have a chance. The door behind Clara creaked open. She spun around to see Mr. Klein reaching into his coat pocket, revealing a silver pistol. She backed away slowly, keeping her eyes trained on Mr. Klein, if that even was his name, and she pressed herself against the back door of the caboose. He pointed the barrel at her. Rage oozed out from beneath the calm, collected persona he performed earlier. His hand trembled, but he remained in control of himself for the moment. Clara trembled, terrified of what he would do to her. "What do you want from me? Why are you following me?" "I saw you," Mr. Klein said. "I saw what you did to my sister that night." Whatever she planned on saying to him, the words fell empty in her mouth. "This is it. It's over." "What? You thought no one saw you sneak out of her house in the dead of night? And I find my sister dead in her home? No, that's a lie. I would never harm anyone. I'm a good woman." "How do you sleep at night?" he said, his finger twitchy on the trigger. "I know it was you who did it. No sooner had I returned from my hunting trip, I see you sneaking out of her house like some rat. She was dead when I found her." "Please? Have mercy on me. I would never do such a thing. Liar. Mr. Klein drew closer. She fumbled for the handle behind her, desperate for escape. Her weight against the door caused it to swing open, landing her on her back. She held her hands over her head to shield herself. "Why?" he cried. "Why did you do it? Tell me!" A shrill, raspy whistle emanated from the front of the train, distracting Mr. Klein for the briefest moment. Clara seized the opportunity and kicked Mr. Klein in the shin, dropping him to his knees. He screamed, clutching his leg as the gun clattered next to him. Without a second thought, she scrambled for the pistol and swiped it, aiming the barrel at him. "Get up," she said. Mr. Klein held his hands up, pushing himself up off the floor. "I'm not the one that deserves this. I'm not going to die today." She pressed her finger to the trigger, but it wouldn't budge. The hammer. Mr. Klein grabbed hold of the barrel and yanked it back hard. Too hard. Clara released the pistol, and with it, Mr. Klein, screaming as he staggered backward, tumbling off the train. He hit the tracks hard, rolling like a rag doll, before coming to rest, bloodied and limp, his lifeless eyes fixed toward the sky. The wind violently whipped Clara's hair as Mr. Klein's body disappeared beyond view. She steadied herself against the railing, her thumb absent-mindedly tracing the curve of the diamond, lost in a thought she refused to finish. The above story has ended. Let's listen to the next story. The Silent Car. Sarah slid through the closing subway doors, just in time, glancing through the windows at the platform, happy to be heading home. The soft chime alerted the passengers that the train was leaving her stop. She sunk into the closest seat, feeling the cold plastic chill her legs through her jeans, sighing as she rubbed at her tired eyes with her palms. It felt good to finally sit down after such a long day. Her body lurched gently as she was transported through the underground tunnel. She had a long ride, even with the trains running express after midnight, and all she wanted to do was sleep. Her usual routine involved reading books to stay awake on her commute home, but even holding her book felt like too much work tonight. The car was silent, but there were more people than she would have expected. There must have been some kind of event, because usually the only other people taking her subway this late at night were the kind that you had to worry about. But they looked like regular people, just a few stragglers making their way back home. Glancing around, she noticed the other passengers were seated quietly, probably just as tired as her. Their eyes were fixed blankly ahead on the seat in front of them, or watching the dark, steady blur of the tunnel pass by outside of the train windows. Sarah settled in for the long ride, slumping deeper into her seat. She opened her book, staring intently at the first paragraph. She willed the comprehension of the words to come to her, but the words just looked like symbols, refusing to form meaning in her brain. Sarah sighed, closing her book again. She glanced up, making eye contact with a middle-aged woman across the row. Automatically, she turned her gaze away, but something felt off. The woman was still looking at her, gripping a handbag on her lap. Sarah snuck another peek, wondering what this lady's problem was. Her eyes were open, but she was staring past Sarah, at the space where she sat, motionless. Feeling uneasy, Sarah leaned forward slightly. Are you okay?" Sarah called out gently. The woman looked like a statue, not blinking or moving, and urgency cut through Sarah's tiredness. No response. Sarah felt her cheeks get hot, as she tended to flush red when she was nervous. This was weird. In a bad way. She turned to the next person she could see, finding a college-aged young man beside her. He wore baggy jeans and had a big pair of earphones around his neck. His eyes were fixed forward with the same vacant stare. Her voice shook now. "Hello?" A cold sweat flashed across the top of her lip. She swiped at it as she stood abruptly. The book that had been in her lap tumbled to the floor. Panicked, she made her way to the next person. She checked passenger after passenger, professionally dressed men and women, younger-looking students or interns, even a woman with a little dog on her lap. Horrified, she found that the dog was frozen too. She started with polite taps and a low voice, and built up to violently shaking shoulders, pleading for someone to just say or do anything. She dreaded the same look on every face, present yet utterly absent. The lights were all on, but no one was home. The subway hit a turn, and Sarah was propelled sideways. She grabbed a rail, gripping the cool metal and using it to help her keep her balance as she rushed to the end of the car. She shot a hand out for the door handle that connected her car to the next one. Her stomach dropped as the handle refused to budge. Locked. She pounded on the glass, but the next car appeared equally motionless. The train lights flickered, and for a brief moment, she could not see as the car was plunged into darkness. She held her breath as her heart hammered against her ribs, threatening to jump out of her chest and escape. When the lights returned, her skin crawled with dread. Every passenger was now standing perfectly still, staring directly at her. She backed against the door, her mind spiraling. "Please," she whispered. She wanted to close her eyes. She couldn't, though. She was too afraid of what might happen if she looked away. Instead of words, she heard whispers. Soft at first, like the jostling and whooshing noises from the train in motion, but quickly growing louder. They filled the car, echoing unintelligible murmurs. The voices were angry, thick with accusation in her ears. What had she done to upset them? "Stop!" Sarah cried. She jammed her fingers into her ears, plugging them. It didn't help. The whispers grew louder and louder, judging her and taunting her and blaming her. For what? Suddenly, the subway jolted sharply to the right, knocking her off balance. Sarah fell. She felt herself falling for too long, waiting for the impact of the dirty car floor. She gasped sharply, jerking awake. Her head had slipped against the rail between her seat and the subway door. The train rocked as it slowed down, approaching her station. She heard the familiar subway voice announce, "This is Franklin Avenue. Transfer is available to the 2 and 3 trains." Sarah glanced around, frantic. Passengers chatted softly, scrolling through phones or listening to music. Normalcy surrounded her. Her heart still raced. She didn't trust it yet. But had it just been a dream? She took deep breaths, trying to will her panic to go down. Be calm. You are safe, she thought, just exhausted and stressed out from work. She gathered her belongings, relieved to see her book on her lap, not scattered across the floor. As she stepped off of the train, her nose and lungs were assaulted by the belly, muggy platform air. The grimy realness of the familiar gross platform felt like it was bringing her back to reality. Her legs were a little shaky, but she was grateful to be moving, to be able to leave and put the strange nightmare behind her. Sarah made her way out of the station towards the stairs. She climbed up and out, feeling her phone vibrate. She pulled her phone out of her pocket, squinting at the notifications. Someone texted her from an unknown number. She opened the message and read, "Wake up." Sarah froze, her pulse quickening again. Anxiety surged back, sharp and biting. Her fingers trembled slightly as she glanced back toward the departing subway. She saw them again, watching her. Through the windows, all of the passengers stood motionless, facing her. She felt the hairs on the back of her neck raise and waited until the train vanished into the tunnel and the people were out of view. Sarah ran up the remaining stairs, emerging onto the street, desperate for the cool, open air and clarity. She continued to run, pumping her legs as the sense of unease lingered. She glanced repeatedly at the people passing by her on the sidewalk, wondering if they were going to have that haunting, identical expression on their faces. She made it to her walk-up apartment, sprinting up 4 flights of narrow stairs, quickly unlocking the door and shoving herself inside. Sarah double-locked the door and pressed her forehead into the wood as she looked out of the peephole. What if they followed her home? She waited, forcing herself to breathe as quietly as possible to see if they would appear at the top of the stairs on her floor. "Come on," she said out loud to herself. "Get it together." She opened her phone again, rereading the unsettling message. "Wake up. She typed back cautiously, "Who is this?" The reply was instant. "You know who. You saw us." Her breath caught in her throat. Fingers gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles whitened. Sarah tried to will the nightmare away, but the vacant faces, whispered accusations, and the locked subway doors all followed her. She stumbled to her window, looking down at the street below. Cars rushed past, their honking sounds reaching her window. New Yorkers moved briskly at their quick walking pace, looking like dozens of little ants with places to be. As she stared, her reflection in the window twisted subtly. For a split second, her own eyes stared back, wide and vacant, mirroring the subway passengers. Sarah gasped, jerking away from the glass. She collapsed heavily on her couch, pressing her shaking hands into the cushions to try and ground herself. There's no way that was real, she told herself. Her vision was tunneling, blurred by exhaustion and fear. Her breathing came manually. In and out, she willed herself. In and out. In and out. In and... The next story will begin now. In flight. Meal. Leo was not a fan of flying. Not like this. Sitting quietly with strangers in an enclosed space, like he was back in the classroom. That was one of his ideas of hell. He had many ideas of hell, and very few of heaven. He made sure her was one of the first passengers on the plane. He took his seat with no fuss and no nonsense, and then did his best to weather the storm of humanity around him. He tried the breathing technique his therapist had taught him, and he also tried zoning out. Neither worked. A voice in his head was screaming at him to leave. Anything was better than this. Screw the deal. Just get off the plane and go home. Maybe Jimmy was right. They should buy the Vibe Bar, change its name to something far cooler, and live the simple life. Leo's Bar. Thoughts of the bar helped calm him for a little while, but then he realized that his ambition was taking the concept to places that were far from simple. Leo sighed. Jimmy would make that bar work. He really would. But then Leo would come along, interfere, and fuck it up. And the worst of it was that Jimmy would smile sweetly and let him ruin everything. Sometimes Leo wondered whether he wasn't wired right, that maybe he'd been dropped on his head as a baby, or his mother had had a secret drug habit. Leo was never settled or content. Nothing was ever good enough. Or if it seemed like it was, it soon turned into the brown stuff and stunk to high heaven, meaning Leo had to move onto pastures new before the shit stuck to him, and he was the one stinking the place up. Somehow, he lost himself somewhere in his thoughts and self-absorption, thankful of the respite. barely taking in the safety briefing. He came to himself as the plane accelerated down the runway, and he was pressed down into his seat as they traveled skyward. He enjoyed this bit, but it also terrified him. There was nothing natural about being propelled into the sky. He tried not to consider the landing. It was the landing that could kill you. Hit the ground hard enough, and it was all over. He blew out a breath and closed his eyes. He kept them closed as he mulled the deal. This was the big time. Once he'd done this deal, he'd be a different animal, and the vibe bar would be far beneath him. He was a player now. Things were on the change, and people better take note. They would have to take note. He'd make sure of it. "Drink, sir?" The question fazed him, but he quickly returned to himself, ordering a bourbon, then making it a double. As he poured his drink into the crappy plastic cup, he tuned into the interaction between the air hostess and the passenger sat next to him. The voice was what caught his attention. There was no mistaking the owner of that voice. If Leo were to turn and gawp at the woman next to him, he knew that he would find her attractive. Maybe too attractive. Leo's measure of too attractive was not misogynistic. He applied the same rule to man and beast alike. Beautiful people could be really up themselves and manage to be a pain in the ass at the same time. Leo had experienced this and had no time for it. Mostly, he had no time for it. There was always room for exceptions, and she turned out to be yet another of the exceptions. "Hey," he said, as he turned to greet her. "I'm Leo." She smiled and nodded. "I'm Grace. Nice name," he told her. And for once, he thought he might mean it. There followed a silence that could have been awkward, but instead was filled with anticipation, or at least was as far as Leo was concerned. "I don't usually," he began, but trailed off as both the words and the sentiment felt off kilter. "I bet that's what you say to all the girls you sit next to on a plane," she said, with a hint of humor in her voice. That voice. There was something cathartic about it. Not only that, her very presence was doing something to him. Some things. He was regressing. A young boy around the babysitter. A pretender to a throne he never thought he would ever sit on. His body was fizzing, and his brain was spinning so that he couldn't think straight. "So, Leo," she said, "what is it that you do?" That last word was heavy with meaning, but he could not discern it. "I'm a businessman," he replied. "The problem with the dog-eat-dog world of business is you have to piss a few people to get anywhere. Am I right?" She was smiling. He nodded. "Seemed impossible not to. Trick is not to piss the wrong people off," she said in a quieter tone. Leo paused for a moment, his face a question. It were almost as though she knew something that he didn't. But how could she? She was just a stranger on a plane, and this was small talk to pass the time as they lingered in the limbo of this uncomfortable travel. Then she casually placed her hand on his thigh, and everything took a sharp right turn. "I find flying so dull." Now she was barely whispering. "Don't you?" "Not so much so now," Leo replied. Grace grinned at him. There was something overtly sexy about that grin. It sent a thrill up Leo's spine. The sensation was heightened as Grace's hand stroked higher up his thigh, and he found himself wanting more, wanting so much more. "Your business?" she asked, her voice stroking the back of his neck in time with her hand on his thigh. "Is it dangerous?" "Very." His own voice felt thick and stilted. He was inexplicably drowsy, but his senses felt heightened. Her touch was electrifying him. "I walk on the wild side." He wasn't sure why he'd told her that. Wild side? They weren't even his own worlds. "I knew it!" she said excitedly, her hand going all the way up his inner thigh and resting exactly where he had hoped it might. "You're a very naughty man, aren't you?" Naughty? Was he? If anyone else had asked him this question, he'd have put them in their place. But with her, it was different. It was like she was royalty, a bona fide princess, the sort you couldn't refuse. And he wasn't going to refuse her when she was working magic on him with that hand of hers. Couldn't react badly with where her hand was right now. "I have been known to be naughty." He struggled to say the words as an involuntary gasp threatened to intermingle with them. "In that case, I think you better ask for a blanket." Grace gave him a playful squeeze. She was leaning in towards Leo now. He felt her breath on his earlobe and neck. "Sure," he said, and duly obliged. "That's better," purred Grace as she spread the blanket over Leo. The armrest was up and out of the way now. "This business of yours, it's criminal, isn't it?" "Can be," Leo replied, as Grace moved closer to him and nuzzled his neck, sending waves of pleasure through him. The anticipation was building, and he was reeling from this turn of events. He was no longer enduring a painful flight. He was enjoying a mile-high tryst. "Oh, look, you're bleeding." Her words took too long to sink in. He responded instead to her hand, leaving him and taking his wrist instead. There was a smear of blood, but he hadn't noticed any pain or act that could have caused the slight wound. "Here, let me." He watched as she lapped at the bloodied skin on his wrist. However slow he'd been with what she'd been saying, his body responded quickly and fully to this. She was sending waves of pleasure through him, and his imagination was going to the best of places, even before she began kissing and then sucking at his flesh. He'd never known pleasure like it, never realized how sensitive his wrists were. They sat like that for a while. Grace lapping and kissing him as he looked on, Leo doing his best to stifle his moans and hold himself back. The way he was responding to her, it was like his first time, but he had decades of experience to bring to the party. Something so simple as kissing his wrist. Who knew? And if she could have this effect on him as she did this, what further pleasures awaited? He was disappointed when she stopped, resisting the urge to ask her not to cease, putting a hold on begging her for more. Instead, he went for small talk to disguise his blatant need for her. "What do you do, Grace?" he asked, as she slipped her arm around him and drew closer to him. Her hand was wrapped around him now. It felt so good. He barely registered her having undone his belt and trousers, losing his touch, drowning out the dissenting thoughts, going with it. He'd seen plenty of action before today, but not like this, not with a woman like Grace. And she was doing things to him that he didn't know were possible. He wanted her more than any woman he'd ever met, wanted to give himself over to the pleasure he knew she could so readily bestow. Her voice, her presence, it had spoken of this, drawn him in. Now she was fulfilling the promise that was made as soon as they'd taken their seats on this flight. A chance encounter that was blowing his mind to pieces as she stroked him and pleasured him. She answered his question with that voice of hers. "I deal with the naughty boys. I eliminate risks," she breathed into his ear. "And you've been a very naughty boy. Fran Johnstone is not happy with you going behind his back with this deal of yours." His eyes widened in shock, but he barely had time to let the words sink in before her teeth sank into his neck. His back arched, and he wanted to protest, to struggle, but it was already too late for that. Too late for Leo. Grace took her time and enjoyed her in-flight well. These business trips were very lucrative for an assassin with her skills and proclivities. Less so for loose cannons like Leo. We think it's over, but in fact, it's just begun. The next story will thrill you in a completely different way. The trip of a lifetime. The trees are so much bigger out here, I said, as I looked out the passenger side car window. We were driving from the airport in the cab we just got. The lady driving was rude. She barely even looked at us. But we're out of there, and officially on vacation. The flight was long. I tried to sleep, but the man next to me was a talker. "I'm too nice," my girlfriend says, but that's what keeps the world a better place. Besides, the man kept buying me drinks, which is why I'm looking out the window. I might hurl, "And greener, this place is beautiful," says Kenny. We're finally in the Pacific Northwest. Our bags are packed, and we're headed to Mat Hood. We have a week out here and 4 days spent in the mountains. Kenny has family out here, so we're staying with his aunt the first night. And then we're off to breathe that crisp forest air. We made it to his aunt's house. She was so warm and welcoming. I felt right at home. After a nice meal of homemade beef stew and a shower, I was ready for bed. I bid them good night, and off I went, fast asleep in no time. I woke up in a panic. The room unfamiliar. Where am I? I thought, as my senses start to adjust. There's a soft buzzing coming from the fluorescent lights above me. My arms and legs are secured to this hospital bed, it seems. But this doesn't feel like a hospital. It's too cold. I try to move my head, but that's secured too. Hello? I call, but no answer. Hello. Again silence. Suddenly a man is standing above me. He covers my mouth as I go to scream once more. Shut up! They'll know you're awake. And then they'll make you forget. You mustn't forget. It's not safe. Run! Something pokes me, and I'm out again. I awake in bed, extremely well rested. It's 6:00 a.m. What a crazy dream, I thought, as I smelt the coffee. I jump out of bed and run to the kitchen, where Kenny's Aunt Gloria is standing in her long silk lavender-colored nightgown and matching slippers. She seems so frail, yet strong and intimidating at the same time. A soft smile forms as she bids me good morning. Ken's not up yet, but you're more than welcome to join me for some bean water, she says with a chuckle. I follow her outside to the patio. The air is fresh and moist, the coffee warm and delicious. You can see the sun glisten off the morning dew as the birds sing their welcome to the day. It sure is nice of you to let us stay here, I say. Kenny and I have been planning this trip for a while now, and I am so excited it's finally happening. You two boys, be careful out there. I hear stories all the time about hikers going missing in those woods. These aren't like the mountains you have on the East Coast. These are real mountains, inhabited by really big creatures. I'm sure you've heard of Bigfoot. She says. I chuckle. Ha, Bigfoot, please. He's just a myth. If Bigfoot is real, then I hope I see him. He'll take a photo and become rich. Gloria shook her head and looked deep into her coffee, almost as if she was trying to see the bottom of her cup through the black liquid it now held. Like I said, just be careful, please. It's now 10:00 a.m., and we are on our way to the mountain. Gloria let us use her car since she doesn't drive anymore. She's 75 now, and hasn't driven since she was 70, and got lost driving home. They found her a day later, parked in a parking area 15 miles from the house. We made it to the mountain after about 2 hours of driving, and we couldn't wait to get on the trail. As we loaded up our packs, Kenny and I discussed our route, where we would stop for water and lunch breaks, where we would camp, and which streams we will pass, so we know where to collect water when we get low. All said and done, the trail up and down the mountain shouldn't take more than 3 days, but we're taking it slow since we haven't done a mountain of this caliber before, so we planned for 4 days. We're hiking Timberline Trail. It passes 3 major landmarks and has snow runoff year-round, so finding water shouldn't be a problem. In total, it's just over 41 miles. We're all loaded up and ready to start our hike when I realize I left my trekking poles at the airport. They must have fallen out of my pack. Just find a stick on the hike. It'll serve the same purpose, says Kenny. I mock him, but I know that's what will happen. Easy for you to say. You didn't forget anything, but he did. The compass. Well, how are we supposed to know where we're going now? I ask. We still have a map, and the trails are marked. It'll be fine, he says in a not-so-reassuring voice. We've been walking for hours, and I haven't seen a single soul. It's day 2 in the woods. The first day went by so fast, but now the excitement and newness has worn off. The woods are long and damp, flora as far as the eye can see. No roads, cars, people. Hey, are we on the right path? I ask. Yeah, we should be coming up on Cloud Cap in about 5 more miles. Ken responds. I don't believe him, though, and my body hurts. It must be from sleeping on the ground. And I kept having the dream about the guy telling me to run. Maybe that's just making me paranoid. There, see? I told you we're going the right way. That must be Cloud Cap Inn, exclaimed Ken. As I stumbled over the hill, I saw what appeared to me as an abandoned shack in the middle of the forest. I don't think that's it, I yell, but Ken was already sprinting towards the front door. I call first shower, he yells as he enters the doors. I approach the building cautiously, examining the weathered cedar shakes, the broken shutters hanging from the windows. How is this place still in business? I thought. I push open the heavy oak door, and inside, the place looks immaculate. It's an open floor plan with 2 massive fireplaces at either side of the room. The carpet covers the hardwood floor, and drapes cover the windows. I look to the front desk. It's the man from my dream. I told you to run, he says as a loud bang comes from the room upstairs. Kenny screams, bang! Then silence. I run as fast as I can up the stairs, skipping 4 steps at a time. I take a left. The hallway goes on forever. Which room did it come from? Kenny! I yell as I'm racing down the hallway. I hear no response, Kenny! Again, nothing. I ran downstairs, and there's no one around. The doors are locked, and I can't get out. I try for a window, but they're boarded up from the inside. I ran back upstairs and tried those windows, but to no avail. I'm trapped. But how? Why? Just as I ask this, I hear a noise coming from the stairs. I turn around, and there I see it. Kenny's body, 2 gunshot wounds. "It must feed," says a voice from the other end of the room. I turn to look. Gloria? Bang. My knee is on fire. I cry out in pain as the creature appears. I look into its bright yellow eyes, soulless and empty. Its teeth big and sharp. Lips stained with blood. Why Gloria? Because I love him, she says, as she points the gun straight at me. And he loves me. Bang. I fall to the ground. The world seems blurry. I see the smoke coming from the barrel of the Smith & Wesson. I see Kenny stand and take the gun from his aunt. Just as my eyes close for the final time, I should have ran. The end. The above story ends, but never stops. Here is another story that will not disappoint you. Cornflower Blues. It always came at night. That night was no different in that respect. I had heard it lumbering around outside as the sun disappeared from the sky. The sound of scraping metal as it circled the house. I had always fought the urge to look directly at it, instead only catching glimpses of it in the shadows. If I focused, I could shuffle it to the back of my mind like a deck of cards. But those lonely hours, when night approached and my mind was no longer engaged by work or meaningless check-ins with the few friends I managed to keep, were the hardest. At first, the check-ins came daily, then weekly, then monthly, then whenever they had a free second to pity me via text. "Hey girl, you doing okay? Do you need anything?" I don't think any of them would have known what to do had I answered yes. I couldn't blame them though. Life goes on. For some people, at least. But anyway, the difference in this particular night was that I had decided to allow my mind to go to that place. No shuffling this time. Instead, accepting the cards that were dealt. Sometime after my 5th or 6th glass of Pinot Noir, I turned my phone off, placed it on the end table next to a stack of unpaid bills, pushed the dirty clothes to one end of the couch, and sank into the other end. Alone. It had been 12 months to the day since I lost my sweet boy with the cornflower blue eyes. Cornflower Connie, as I called him. Parents should never have to bury their children. Todd was completely shattered. He left me this past June. I had dropped to a rail-thin 99 pounds, and he said he couldn't stand to see me hurt any longer. I tried everything: counseling, group, rehabilitation programs. but everyone grieves differently. I guess Todd had to grieve alone. At some point, I nodded off, waking only to an unsettling silence, quickly realizing the noise was gone. I wiped the drool from my chin, licked my cracked lips, and decided to check it out. With my body bladed to the window, I pulled the curtain to the side and saw it standing under the dim porch light. The back of my neck tingled, and my heart thumped in my chest, acting like my body's panic alarm. I would normally just do a quick look. Instead, for the first time, I stayed. I studied it. Its skin was the color of burnt charcoal, and its back curved like a question mark. It shifted under the light, revealing a Grinch-like face that scrunched even more as it smiled at me, like a mischievous feline. But there, above the unnerving grin, I saw them, those familiar eyes. My cornflower Connie had come home. All I had to do was focus on those eyes. Don't you want to be with me again, Mommy? Let me in, and you can hold me again, just like you used to. What was I supposed to do? Of course, I wanted to be with him again. It would surely be better than telling myself that the random white blob in the sky actually resembled a heart. A message from my Connie. I love you too. Yeah, you can convince yourself of almost anything if you believe it enough, and if you're sad enough, just like the cardinal that occasionally lands on my fence. Good morning, Connie. Thanks for the visit. I let him in. His long, rubbery fingers took me by the arm, led me upstairs, never breaking his gaze. Where are we going? I asked, barely a whisper, in what seemed like the first words I had spoken in days. To my room, Mommy. The door creaked open, and the lights came on, bringing the room back to life. I have no idea if I flipped the switch or not. It felt like I had floated up the staircase. The room was just as he left it. COONRD, colorfully stenciled on the blue wall above his big boy twin bed. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle sheets and comforter still ruffled from that night, a little over a year ago, when he stumbled into our room just before midnight. Mommy, my chest feels weird, he moaned. After a 104.1 fever, we rushed him to the hospital. My cornflower Connie would never come home again. His fingers rolled up my sleeve and led me to the bed. I pressed his Michelangelo stuffed animal to my face, inhaling deeply, hoping it still held Connie's scent. It didn't. The tears fell, and his grip tightened on my arm, leading me into the bed. He never let go of my arm. Lay with me, Mommy. I climbed in, pulled the covers to my stomach, and rested my head on Connie's pillow. I miss you so much, baby, I yelled through tears, pounding my one free fist on the mattress. I'm here if you keep looking in my eyes. Just then, his eyes flickered, and it as if I was watching a projection screen. I watched as we took in the afternoon show of the new Spider-Man movie last year. Connie's lap littered with buttery popcorn that missed his mouth, his icy stained lips framing his checkered smile, a flicker, a summer afternoon drive around the neighborhood, blasting random 90s songs. He loved the songs that I grew up on. We would do our absolute worst to sing along. Keep looking at my eyes, Mommy. Just a little bit more until you can hold me again. His grip tightened some more. Another flicker, a lazy Sunday. Me sprawled out on the couch, my Connie's little body slowly rising and falling with my breathing as he naps on my chest. Another second, and I'm yours again. How could I say no? I did what he asked, just a little longer. The avalanche of warmth I felt was euphoric, as if my insides were swaddled in a heated blanket. It was the first semblance of comfort and peace that I hadn't felt since he was actually here with me. I did what he asked. Then I waited. That was 2 days ago, and I don't see my cornflower Connie anywhere. The comfort I had felt the other day dissipated in an instant. I've been patiently waiting. Thank you for being here to listen with me. Let's enjoy the new story together. Monochromatic. This story includes depictions of mental health and death. There is nothing graphic, but these topics are touched on. I had never been quite fond of Eve as her psychiatric nurse, the buoy who kept her from drowning in an ocean of madness. I should have made an effort to respect my patient. I should have, and yet I couldn't. It was unbearable to deal with a soul so far gone, someone so dreadfully insane. Nonetheless, Evelyn Barrett was still mine to care for, my own burden. It was odd to dwell on the fact that someone so young, barely even 18 to be exact, could mentally fall down such a slippery slope. Eve was admitted to the sanitarium around 2 months ago, following her breakdown at school. According to her classmates, Eve had never been social. She tended to keep to herself when given the choice. And while this was not abnormal behavior for a teenage girl, it had always been different with Eve. Well, it had grown to become different. Students began reporting incidents involving Eve. They would hear her muttering to herself in class, her words unintelligible, but her whispers crazed. They would hear her sobbing in bathroom stalls. Her teachers noticed her grades slipping. Eve would write ominous messages on her papers, and she would draw horrific drawings in her notebook. Drawings of characters plucked straight from horror movies, monsters. Though her behavior was abnormal, Eve caused no problems. She remained silent, which was nothing out of the ordinary. She basked in the endless insanity of her paranoid, twisted mind. But at that time, no one was aware of how truly twisted it was. After months of containment, Eve suddenly exploded. She jumped up in the middle of class and shrieked, screaming bloody murder. Accounts of the story from her classmates explained that Eve screamed, "Leave me alone," dozens of times. According to the witnesses, Eve was not talking to a specific person, not one that anyone could see anyway. Her teachers restrained her and subdued her screams. Her behavior was, according to her classmates, purely and utterly horrifying, insane. And so, I was stuck with Evelyn Barrett. I tried to build connections with my patients, and usually, I was successful. Over my years as a nurse, I liked to think that my psychological support helped my patients heal. It did. There was no doubt about it. I did my job well until Eve came along. For some odd reason, I could not break through with Eve, break into her subconscious and heal her fragile mind. Whenever I tried to talk to her, she would do one of two things. Either she would completely block me out, or she would scream nonsense at me. In any case, neither method was beneficial in the slightest. The past 2 months had consisted of pointless therapy sessions and no progress whatsoever. I couldn't help but feel sorry for the poor girl. As I walked into my tidy office, I pushed out a sigh and slumped into my armchair. Eve was scheduled to meet with me at any second, and to be quite honest, I was dreading our session. Up until now, my day had been calm. My serenity was about to be interrupted simply by being in the presence of the crazed child. 3 knocks on the door was all it took. My spine straightened, and I felt the muscles in my neck tighten. My automatic physical response whenever Eve was near. The creaking of the door disturbed my therapeutic silence, and as I watched a caretaker escort Eve through the doorway, a queasy feeling began to form in my gut. Eve seemed on edge today, more on edge than normal. Her long cascade of honey blonde hair was ruffled, as though she couldn't be bothered to run a comb through it. Her face was a sickly shade of white. The shadows casted upon her face complemented the lack of life within her frozen, gray eyes. Eyes that hardly looked like eyes at all. She looked dreadful. The caretaker made sure that Eve settled comfortably on the couch before taking her leave. Nevertheless, Eve looked nothing but uncomfortable. She brought her knees to her chest and hugged them tightly, her body resembling something of a ball. Her hands shook while her feet tapped on the cushion, over and over again. It was easy to assume that nerves had Eve in a chokehold. "How are you doing today, Eve?" I asked the girl, my voice visibly annoyed. I didn't care enough to put on a facade for her. Eve wasn't fond of me, as far as I could tell. It was obvious by the way her eyes ever so slightly cut into my face, as though they were 2 honed knives. Regardless, the feeling was mutual, and so treating one another this way had become routine. Usually when I asked her a question, Eve ignored it completely. I assumed she would simply ignore me by the way her gaze dug into my skin. And so I wasted no time before pulling out my notebook. Lazily, I jotted down a note. "Silence," I wrote. Nothing out of the ordinary, until I heard a raspy breath emerge from her mouth. "He's going to kill me soon," Eve muttered, her voice barely a whisper. I could hardly comprehend her words. Her empty eyes widened as her fingernails dug into her pants. The girl rocked back and forth in a crazed manner, almost as though she truly feared for her life. I, for one, believed that Eve was bananas, but as her nurse, I could not disregard such an alarming phrase. "Who? Who's going to kill you?" I asked, as calmly as possible. Though I knew that Eve was completely mad, I knew that she was. Her words still managed to send a chill through my bones. Eve disregarded my words for a moment, her mind unable to flee from whatever eternal nightmare it was trapped in. Her gaze remained on the ground and focused on anything but me. Seconds ticked by. Minutes. Finally, Eve's eyes snapped to mine, somehow more frantic than before. "He's taking over my life, the world around me, everything," she snapped loudly, her sharp words making me flinch. Her body recoiled after her outburst, and she scrunched back into her ball with a shaken expression on her face. "He's going to kill me soon," she repeated. "I just know it." With a sigh, I set my notebook aside and leaned forward. This wasn't the first time that Eve had acted up during a session, but this was the first time that she seemed so sure. So sure about the fact that something was bothering her. I said, "You are safe here, Eve. Nothing is going to kill you. This is all in your mind, okay? You're okay." "No, please, Debbie. I am not insane. This is real," Eve persisted. Hearing her say my name was odd. She had never addressed me before, and until now, I did not know that she even knew my name. He's out to get me. The Shadow Man. He's the Shadow Man?" I repeated incredulously. Despite Eve's urgency, I did not believe her words. Her crazed, perplexing words. She had never once opened up to me like this, and so I had no reason to believe that she was telling the truth now. Instead of dismissing her comment, I wanted to dig further. It was my job, after all. "Who is he?" Eve shuddered, as though a gust of icy wind had blown through the room. "I don't know." She paused abruptly and locked eyes with me. "But he takes things from me. He steals them." Despite my confusion, I played into her claim. "What does he take from you?" Eve blinked multiple times. "Color." "Color?" "The color that I see, the color that she sees." "What does that mean, Eve?" I asked, and anxiety grasped my brain. Her answer, while strange, was also oddly specific. And something about that was off-putting. Color blindness. Was that what Eve was hinting at? Were colors fading from her vision? I took my assumption and rolled with it. Does your family have a history of color blindness? That sounded about right. Perhaps Eve was losing her sense of color, and she was freaking out about it. That wouldn't be anything out of the ordinary, but it was obviously nothing to go crazy about. No, it's not color blindness. He takes the color from me. She snapped again, her expression flushing with maroon fury. You're wrong. I am not crazy. You think I am, but I'm not. I'm not. Suddenly, Eve was on her feet, marching across the room to my desk. I sat up out of habit and hesitated. Eve seemed angry. Was she going to attack me? Grab for a weapon? I decided to take no chances, and I, too, rose to my feet. I turned to face Eve, only to find that she was inspecting various objects on my desk. Colored pens, Post-its, my computer. It's all black and white. Everything. She picked up a lime green Post-it and shook it in her hand. I can't tell what color this is. He stole it from me. It's gone. It's all gone. He's gonna kill me once everything is gone. Eve, calm down. No, I can't. Eve paused abruptly when her eyes fell upon a particular object on my desk. Her mouth gaped open as she snatched the object, inspecting it in awe. I almost reached for her arm and demanded for her to put the object down, but I restrained myself. Eve held the card that my daughter had made for me years ago. On the front of the card was a drawing of a rainbow, colored messily with crayon. My daughter had handcrafted the card when I fell terribly ill, and I believe that the card itself had cured me. I had kept it lying on my desk all these years, and the messy rainbow had been my constant reminder that color can supply us with life and wellness. And now, as Eve's shaky hands grasped the card, I fought the urge to snatch it from her. This card was precious to me. I couldn't risk her ruining it. It's colorful. She gasped in awe, her eyes absorbing the card as though its sparkles were emitting from it. I can see the rainbow. He hasn't stolen it from me. Suddenly, Eve's guard was up once again, and she clenched the card against her chest. I winced as the paper grew crinkled in her strong grasp. I need to keep this card with me. I can't let the Shadow Man steal it. It's all I have left. Protectively, I shook my head. My deranged patient could not be trusted with my precious card, my personal gift from my daughter. No, I don't think that's... Debbie, please, Eve urged. For one moment, the desperation in her voice made her sound sane. This is life or death. I am not insane. He is going to kill me. I can't let him steal the color from this. It's all I have. Please. Hesitance gripped me by the throat, and I opened my mouth to speak. Nothing came out. Eve stared me down, and her empty eyes were suddenly not empty anymore. They weren't lifeless. Instead, they seemed brighter, filled with life, with hope. I had never seen this side of Evelyn Barrett before. I stuttered. Nothing is going to happen to you, Eve. You don't need this card. But as I said these words, even I heard the doubt within my voice. I felt that I would regret keeping the card. Perhaps if I gave Eve the card to borrow, she would feel more at ease. Perhaps this card was the key to break through into Eve's mind. Perhaps she wasn't so far gone. Reluctantly, I backed away from the girl. Just keep it for now. That's fine, I sighed. Eve's eyes sparkled, and a hint of a smile pricked at her lips. She looked normal, as though she didn't live in a sanitarium. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, she repeated hastily. Just return it to me when you no longer need it. Of course. Eve's mannerism was completely different than it had been when she first arrived. As she continued inspecting the card in awe, I couldn't help but smile. Perhaps I could help her. Perhaps the Eve that I was not quite fond of was fading, and a new girl was coming to light. Either way, I felt the start of something new. Hope. The next day, I was scheduled to check up on Eve. The feeling of apprehension that usually sat in the pit of my stomach was gone. Ever since our session yesterday, I had faith that my patient was healing, truly healing. I walked with optimism, hopeful that my relationship with Eve was growing stronger. One of the best feelings as a therapist was knowing that you were of aid to your patient, that you were able to dig them out of a great hole. It felt rewarding, fulfilling. I approached Eve's door and knocked gently so as not to startle her. Though she was in the process of healing, she was still fragile. I waited for a few seconds before knocking again. Eve did not respond, and I heard no noise from inside the room. The queasy feeling in my stomach returned. I knocked louder. No response. To accompany my uneasiness, an alarm resonated through my skull. Something was wrong. Skeptically, I pushed open the door and took a quick glance around the room. It didn't take long for me to spot her. Eve. She was sprawled out on the ground, unconscious. Without hesitation, I crouched on the floor next to her, shaking her shoulder. Eve? Eve? I blurted. There was no response. She didn't move. No, Eve. Wake up. My chest felt light as I reached for Eve's delicate wrist. There was no pulse. In fact, her skin was a block of ice. Oh my God, Eve. Numbly, my eyes trailed over towards her hand. Her fingers limply held a little slip of paper with a rainbow on it. The card that my daughter made. The next few moments were a blur. My body began moving on its own, while my mind remained stuck on the image of Eve's body on the floor. her still, pale body. As I unconsciously grabbed the card out of Eve's limp hand and shoved it in my pocket, I heard muffled voices entering the bedroom, scrambling around me, asking me what had happened. I didn't process the question, couldn't process it. All of my senses were honed in on Eve, on the fact that she was dead. Nurses surrounded Eve and I, and before I knew it, I was laying on the ground too, losing consciousness. I felt as though I was floating in outer space, and it became a struggle to breathe. My vision was fading into a deep darkness, and everyone near me was fading. The nurses, Eve, everything was fading. I was grasping onto nothing. But no, something was still there, hidden in the corner of my periphery. Though it blended within the darkness, overtaking my mind, it wasn't completely hidden. I saw it. Him, though hardly visible, I was still able to make out the silhouette of a large man standing in the corner of the room. He hardly looked like a man at all, really. As far as I could tell, he had no hair, no face. He looked like an apparition by the way he blended into the wall behind him. He was the absence of everything, a void where light should have been. It was impossible to make out the distinct features of the man. But even with a blurry glimpse, I knew that the man was something of a sinister entity. Evil. As I blacked out, two words repeatedly rang in my head. They reverberated deeply, their consonants sounding of menacing death knells. It was all I heard as I lost consciousness. Shadow man, shadow man, shadow man. I woke up with a start on the couch in my office. My thoughts immediately trailed to what I last could remember. They trailed to Eve. She had died. Was that all a dream? What if it wasn't? What was the cause of her death? She was healthy, physically at least. Nothing made sense. The shadowed silhouette grazed my thoughts, and a chill fell over my body. I must have been imagining the man. I had not been in the right state of mind, nearly on the brink of passing out. It was an illusion. It had to be. So why was it that Eve had also been hallucinating a shadow man? A lump in my pocket alerted my senses, and I reached for whatever was inside. My fingers lifted out a piece of crinkled paper, scrunched up in a ball. The card. It was ruined, shoved in my pocket like a piece of trash. As my eyes welled up with tears, I unfolded the paper and examined the rainbow on the front. I blinked multiple times and wiped away the tears from my eyes. Something wasn't right. My vision was playing games with me. As I stared at the card, at the sloppy rainbow on the front, my heart dropped as I realized something. Eve wasn't crazy. The rainbow on the front of the card was no longer drawn in colorful crayon. It was purely black and white, so today's story has come to an end. Or perhaps it never really ended. There are mysteries still there, questions still unanswered, and sometimes things that seem to only exist in stories can creep into reality in unexpected ways. Are you sure that when you turn off the sound, everything around you will still be normal as before? Or is there something watching you? Either way, always remember that these are just stories, or at least we want to believe that they are. If you like moments of suspense, tension, and breathlessness, don't forget to follow me so you don't miss the next stories. And next time, when you come back, make sure you are ready, because what awaits you may be even scarier than you thought. See you again if you still have the courage to continue listening.